Thank you all for joining us. And my special thanks to the other speakers joining me today, Beth KONTOS, the president of the American Federation of Teachers of Massachusetts, Mike Thomas, the superintendent of the Brockton Public Schools. And we were going to have Migdalia Berea, a Holyoke parent, but she's now been trapped at work and she can't get away, which is the way it is in this this world that we're living in right now. So we are still going to be graced with the presence of two real experts on the pandemic and the impact that it's having on the education of the children in the Commonwealth. The American Rescue Plan that President Joe Biden signed into law on Thursday is an historic COVID-19 relief package that will provide millions of Americans with the much needed and long overdue support required to make it through this health and economic crisis. It tackles our rental crisis, our utility debt crisis, our unemployment crisis, our child poverty crisis, our mental health crisis, and I could go on and on. But we've organized today's event to highlight a section of the recently enacted American Rescue Plan that will unlock opportunity for millions of children across this country and thousands of children across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Among its many essential provisions in this COVID relief package, we will finally address an educational inequity that predates the coronavirus pandemic, but that has been severely exacerbated by the ongoing health emergency. I'm speaking about the homework gap experienced by as many as 12 million students in the United States who, a year into this pandemic, still do not have internet access at home and are unable to participate in online learning. I'm proud to say that the American Rescue Plan includes my Emergency Educational Connections Act with more than $7 billion in distance learning funding to ensure that all K through 12 students have the internet and tools they need to continue their education online. Massachusetts alone could receive an additional $100 million in additional E-rate funding to connect students across the Commonwealth because of my law. That money goes straight into school districts like Brockton and Holyoke and Chelsea and Boston to get the digital devices into the hands of our kids and our students online. Before the pandemic, students without connectivity were already at an educational disadvantage because they could not complete homework assignments that required internet access after class. No student should have to sit in a strip mall parking lot hoping to connect to local stores' internet in order to finish their papers. And we know who those students are. They're largely Black and brown and poor and immigrant students. We cannot ignore the fact that internet connectivity, the digital divide, is a justice issue. The coronavirus pandemic has made it exceptionally clear that internet access is an essential utility like running water or heat in the winter. And today, as students continue their learning from home, household kitchen tables have doubled as virtual classrooms. And even as we continue to safely reopen schools in the weeks and months ahead, distance learning is not going away. Most schools are opening with hybrid models, still continuing part-time at-home learning. Because of the health crisis, students across the country are suffering from severe learning loss and may need to continue their home education through the summer months. And even after the coronavirus pandemic, we cannot ignore the 21st century educational requirements. Students need their internet access to simply finish their homework. Bottom line, if a young student has no internet connection or device, they cannot learn effectively. There's no reason why the country that invented the internet cannot provide it to children who need it to learn, to develop, and to access the full range of educational opportunity in our country. we just simply cannot allow an 8-year-old to miss the 3rd grade because she doesn't have the internet at home. And that's why I have been fighting every day for the last year to correct this educational injustice and connect all K through 12 students across America. It's why I introduced the Emergency Educational Connections Act with 45 of my colleagues, which provides essential funding through the E-rate program to equip students with internet connectivity and the devices they need for online learning during this pandemic. The E-rate, which already connects physical schools and libraries to the internet, is a trusted program, deliberately designed to require an equitable distribution of funding to our most vulnerable communities, urban, rural, blue, red, everyone. I created this program more than 2 decades ago, and it has since invested more than $54 billion nationwide, with funding for every state in the country, including more than $750 million for the state of Massachusetts. And since day one of the COVID-19 pandemic, I have been calling for funds to expand the E-rate program and use it to connect students where they are right now at home. Yes, they need it on their desk in school. Yes, they need it in the library, but they need it at home as well. And we know, again, who they are: Black, brown, poor, immigrant. They need this at home. But unfortunately, due to the opposition of the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress, this money was not included in the relief packages of 2020 that we passed through Congress. They knocked out my provision each time. Their mistake served only to widen the homework gap and worsen educational outcomes for our young students. And thankfully, under a new Democratic Senate leadership and President Biden, we have corrected this significant educational error. This historic $7 billion investment included in this historic COVID relief bill will help us prevent the homework gap from becoming a damaging learning gap and opportunity gap for our most vulnerable children. Children comprise 20% of our population, but they represent 100% of our future. The American Rescue Plan invests in them so they can realize the constellation of opportunities that is the American dream. That is why this provision is so important. It does say to every child, we are going to get you the internet at home so you can learn as well as any other child in your community, no matter how much more wealthy their family may be. So I'd now like to invite my friend and partner, the president of the American Federation of Teachers in Massachusetts, BETH KONTOS, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, Senator. It's really good to be here. I'm always happy to show up to support you because your work has always kept our students in mind, our communities, and with a tilt towards equity at all times. And that is just super important. So I want to thank you for your work and your success in funding the E-rate program, as well as the historic American Rescue Plan. It will be a game changer to the communities and to our schools specifically. So I just want to think back to the beginning of the pandemic when we had to switch very quickly to remote education. The devices that were given out at the start of the pandemic were lifesavers for our students to continue their education. And our cities really had to dig deep. You know, they were looking for these devices that they might have had in computer labs, but then they had to just find the funding to purchase those devices. But this sounds like this package is going to help us be ready for this, to replace those devices and to expand even further. The pandemic certainly has shown a bright light on the inequities, as you pointed out, in our society. Of those places was the availability of solid and reliable Wi-Fi in our communities, right to our homes. Many of our students did not have it. They were relying on perhaps a family phone in order to do their work. And that's just not an equitable way to do your education. But as you said, for 2 decades, our students have benefited from the past successes of the E-rate program in our schools, but also in our libraries. And I think that's really important. You've led the charge to provide additional money for the E-rate in order to change the rules so our kids could have access to hotspots at home. Where would they be without being able to connect like that? It's been a very long year. So while we seem to be nearing the end of this crisis, you know, vaccines are on the horizon, we're starting to get them, but we're not done with the need for E-rate to support the learning and enrichment opportunities for our communities. So in the American Rescue Plan, you've been able to secure even more support for Wi-Fi, for devices, but also our schools and our libraries really need you know, modems and routers and things that we don't always think about. It's much more than just the computer. We also need the staff to support this kind of work. And I know that's in this plan too. And I really do appreciate that. So let's say there's no pandemic, right? And we still need to have the support so that our kids have the connectivity. They enhance their education by allowing research, homework, also communication, and there's nothing wrong with some fun that leads to some creativity. I mean, have you seen the TikTok videos? I've really enjoyed seeing some of my former students do some pretty creative things. But what I like about this is it supports access to all the valuable resources at our public libraries. I myself download books and podcasts through my public library. I love audiobooks. I listen to them while I walk my dog. And during this past year, it has really helped me find some relaxation. You know, we needed a break from this pandemic, a little escape. And I've also spoken to some patrons of libraries who have used their library Wi-Fi to access health information during this crisis, access to telehealth, and also to make their vaccination appointments. This is all due to the success of E-rate. And as an educator, I saw students who did not have reliable internet at home stay in the school library after school to use the reliable connection to do homework, research on colleges, and to apply for after-school jobs. So I thank you for this. We all benefit from this increase in connectivity, and I'm here to show my gratitude and for your part in closing the opportunity gap for our students and for gaining the funding to help this important work continue long past the pandemic. So I tilt my hat to you, Senator. Thanks for your help.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, so much. And again, the origins of this program go back to my visit to my cousin, Mary O'Neill's 7th grade class at the BB school in Malden when she was a math teacher, and she had a single computer on her desk, and all the kids were gathered around it, and they were doing math. This is like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and so I then said to the whole class, "How many of you have computers at home?" And about 5 of the 25 kids raised their hand in Malden. Yeah. And then I asked how many of you would like a computer at home, and they all raised their hands.
Of course.
Of course. And so that's where my concept of the E-rate began. We have to make sure that it's on every school desk and every library in the country so that every kid had access to it. Not just one computer in the classroom, but so the kids would be able to access this. And ultimately the Republicans blocked me from making it available at home as well for kids. And so here we are now finishing off the story.
Right.
That was very clear to me in my cousin Mary King's math class at the BB school in Malden. These kids need it at home, and they want it at home. They have the same aptitudes as a wealthier kid from the suburbs. They all are fascinated by technology. They're all very good at it, but you need it at home to be able to compete in this modern era. So that's
true.
kind of what this story is about. And this $7 billion is about. It's about finishing it off so that in the same way we're trying to reduce child poverty in this piece of legislation, cutting it in half, we also have to deal with this issue as well, because we want to ensure that kids get the tools so that they aren't in the same situation economically as their parents are, because they've been given the educational tools which they need. That's what this particular part of this bill is all about. So thank you so much, Beth, and thank you for all the teachers for everything you've done over the last year. And now I'd like to introduce Mike Thomas, the superintendent of Brockton Public Schools, to tell us a bit about Brockton's experience with distance learning.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate you having me here today. And I also want to thank you. You've always been a champion for the City of Champions. Obviously, you're a champion for the state of Massachusetts, but you've always looked out for Brockton, and it's much appreciated. I'll go back for when, over the last 10 years, we received over $10 million over the last 10 years through the E-rate program. And that has allowed us in Brockton to build an infrastructure over those years to be able to have, internet access in our schools first. And because of the E-rate program, and that's been so important, because when we closed down a year ago yesterday, March 12th of 20, and we just recently started to come back in a hybrid model. We've been remote since then, and we opened schools back up hybrid for in-person on March 2nd, this past few weeks ago. And during that time, we really had to switch quickly over to remote learning. And we were not a district. We were district ready for it as far as the infrastructure for our schools because of the E-rate, but we were not a district ready for it because, like I said, we had about 10,000 devices for 16,000 students. So we had to quickly switch over, get devices in our students' hands, and that was difficult. And then once we got the devices in our students' hands, then it was the challenge of making sure they had internet access. And I mean, that's a big reason why we're here today and we're talking about it. We had over, I would say, about 8,000 of our families that did not have internet access that allowed them to switch over to remote learning. And it was a battle. And thanks to the senator for putting these funds in place, we were able to get some MiFis out to our families to help with that connectivity. And with this new program through the American Rescue Plan, we can really expand that, because like the senator said, remote learning is not going away. I mean, it's exciting because it's provided us with a lot of opportunities as far as helping us close the achievement gap. We were recognized 2 weeks ago on MSNBC for our after-school tutoring program, which is all remote. And it's a tutoring program that has really taken off, and teachers can be very flexible with their time, and parents can be involved because the tutoring can be done at 8 o'clock at night. It doesn't have to be done right after school if you're, physically in school. So that's really helped us. And it's also provided, again, going into snow days now, we don't have to have snow days anymore, even though we will, so students can have some fun and still enjoy snow days. But those are the important things that this program has done for Brockton. It helped us for something that would take 3 years. So if you asked me to switch a district of 16,000 students and 3,000 educators over to remote learning, if you asked me that back last on March 12th, I would tell you that it would take us about 3 years to do that. Between training, picking a learning management system, an online learning management system, Zoom, Teams, 365. It would take you about 3 years in a school district. And I know Beth knows this well, how long it would take to get a school district ready to switch to that. And we were able to do that in 5 months. And again, that's because of the help of Senator Markey, the money that has been put in through E-rate over the last few years. Again, over 10 million for Brockton over the last 10 years. And we really look forward to the new money coming in, and it'll help us. Again, the achievement gap has grown. We do STAR testing, which It monitors our reading and our math scores for our students, and they have dropped. Some students have lost up to 6 months to a year in their reading and math levels, and that's alarming. But that is what is happening to urban school systems and brown and Black students. And it's my job, along with the job of many others, to come together, do what we need to do as we help our communities recover from the effects of COVID, and Brockton has been hit hard, to get these students back where they need to be. Again, there is an achievement gap before the COVID, and now it has gotten much larger, and it's alarming. And it's going to be programs like that really help bring our students back. So again, it's much appreciated, and I'm thrilled to be here today.
Yep, thank you, Mike, so much. And maybe you could just talk a little bit, if you could, about why we need to make these connections last, because the kids have already fallen behind, and they're not going to catch up by this May or this June or July or August. It's going to be an ongoing process to make sure that kids get it at home throughout the next school year, or maybe the year after that and beyond, because this is a huge educational hole that has been created that these young people are going to need help to surmount.
Absolutely. It's because it's so much more you can do where students don't, obviously it's important to have students in school physically. There's no replacement for in-person learning. But what the connectivity can do is so much more when parents are home. We have several parents that work 2 and 3 jobs. But what we found out, the silver lining in all of this is parents, because that opportunity to meet with teachers at 8, 9 o'clock at night has really helped with family engagement. And that's going to be a big piece about recovery, where teachers can connect with parents later at night and work with the students when the parents can be next to them as they're working on their reading and their math and difficult subjects that they're struggling with. So it really helps with family engagement. And it also helps with social emotional. And as we all know, what our families have gone through for COVID, especially Black and brown families where, jobs have been lost and people have had to move in together to support each other, and losing their homes. It's been very difficult. So to be able to provide social emotional support through our therapists and adjustment counselors, again, to be able to meet with families remotely at night is a huge piece of this, because it helps us keep that connection on Saturdays and Sundays, during vacations. It's going to be so important, because not only do we need to have our students recover academically, and obviously that's a very important thing for a school district, but I also put just as much stock into helping our families and kids recover social and emotionally. And that's been a big focus of the Brockton Public Schools, along with obviously academics.
Yep, thank you, Mike. And Beth, could you just talk just a little bit about how your teachers have adapted to this new world, using the technology, but also wanting to ensure that there's a universality of access to it, an affordability of access. Here it will be free for young people.
Sure, I can't help but I got to go right to what Mike said about that counseling that has been able to happen. So even though a counselor that might have already had a relationship with a student, they're not meeting in person, but this feels pretty personal to be maybe 2 children and 1 adult working through problems. They used to have a lot of lunch bunch where a counselor would eat lunch with 2 or 3 students, and they could talk through issues that they were experiencing. Our counselors were able to continue having those kinds of connections where there was this face-to-face connection. If our students didn't have that connection, I know some of them we would have lost completely if they couldn't have continued with that kind of consistent counseling with someone they already knew and they already trusted. I agree with Mike that there's been a lot more parent involvement, because you don't have to worry about the childcare for your other children when you're having a meeting with a teacher, right? So I might be sitting next to my child and having this meeting. I'm not worried that I had to disrupt my family to figure out how to get to that meeting. So that is terrific. We might even be able to see open houses happen virtually in the future for our people who have transportation problems. But the idea of this being available long-term, when I think of, I grew up with books in my home. I was, very fortunate to not worry about finances as a kid. My own children had that same comfort and certainly privilege to have access to lots of books at home. Many of our students do not have that access, but if they have a computer and they have an access to the online of their own school or the online of the public library, they can access any book that is available through the library. So I just think this is a way to open a world to children that might not have had that opportunity already. And even access to museums. You can tour museums online. I mean, there's so much available to us for enrichment for our kids. So I know my educators were thrilled to be able to have a device handed to the child and just get through those initial bumps, right, Mike? We had to figure out how to Zoom and not lose the kids as we went into breakout rooms, but they figured it out, and all of that cost money. And going forward, we need to look at education and all the expenses that go into it, so that we don't leave our kids behind.
Thank you, Beth. And again, in the same way that we dramatically expanded the child tax credit, cutting the number of children in poverty in half in our country, this is another big piece of the puzzle to make sure that the funding is there for parents to have this technology in their homes for their kids in order to ensure they don't fall behind wealthier families. And so it's just an absolute, I think, part of a pattern of what we did in the American Rescue Plan, to think about this in terms of who was most impacted, who were those who actually paid the biggest price. And it's disproportionately those who are poorer, those who are of color, those who are of immigrant families. So thank you. So to anyone out there, if you have any questions, please ask. We're ready to go.
Hey everyone, it's Lisa Kashinsky from the Boston Herald. Hope you're all doing well. Just wanted to ask, with the return to school coming for elementary and middle school students in April in Massachusetts, what will your needs continue to be around, remote learning, internet access, as the state kind of pushes to get more students back in school, and how will this funding help with that?
I'll go first. At first, again, it's all going to be around the recovery. It's going to be great to have students back in school as we move towards 100%. But we still, right now in Brockton, we did a survey. It looks like we'll have close to 2,000 students that won't be returning, that we'll have to teach remotely because parents are nervous about sending them back to school, and there's some family members, again, with health issues, or the student themselves have health issues, so they'll be staying remote for at least the rest of the school year. So we have to continue to educate those students online full time. So that's the importance of keeping the connectivity. But also, like I just said, we need to spend a lot more time with students than just the 6.5 hours in school to help my students in Brockton recover from the effects of COVID. And that's tutoring online, that's Saturday programs, that's vacation programs, that some will take place in person, but some of it also will take place online. So that's the importance of this, is to continue to educate about 2,000 students online that will stay online, but also help the students recover that are coming back to school so we can do night tutoring and programs on Saturdays and Sundays for them.
That's great. Yeah, I see that when I think of the amount of time my own children used, the flexibility of being able to access library information, but from the comfort of their own home, every student should be able to do that. Not everybody has the exact same schedule. A little bit older students that have jobs might be doing research at a time when the library is not open. So I 100% see the need to support this kind of digital access at all times for all our students. Just bring that equity piece back in. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions?
Senator, this is Paul Kennedy, WBUR. With the emergency funding from this legislation, how do you think that's going to help Massachusetts specifically with Governor Baker wanting all elementary school students back by April 5th? And there's been a little bit back and forth between the teachers union and the governor about how to achieve that goal. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, inside of the relief package, we have $20 billion that is going to be going to the states to help with vaccines and funding for vaccination programs. We're also providing tens of billions of dollars for schools across the country, K through 12. Where we included $350 billion for cities and towns and states across the country. Massachusetts will receive about 2% of that, which is a lot of money, upwards of $7 or $8 billion in that one program. So there's a lot of money that is going to come from the federal government for education, for schools, for cities and towns, and for fighting the coronavirus, so that the governor, the mayors, and the school teachers can be having that conversation in the context of all of that additional funding, which is going to be coming in a very short period of time into the Commonwealth and then into the cities and towns, so that Mike and Beth can be having these conversations knowing all those additional resources are coming.
And Denise from Bloomberg Radio, did you have a question as well? I'll let you unmute here.
Hi, Senator. Thank you. Thank you for helping us out, especially on a Saturday as we kind of monitor everything. As someone who is really dreading springing forward tonight and getting even one fewer hour of sleep, I want to hear a little bit about your plans for daylight savings. Also, I noticed it truly is bipartisan. I see some of the people you're partnered with on the legislation. It was a little bit of a surprise to me, so I'd like to hear about that as well, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, daylight savings time begins later on tonight, and the hour of sunshine will be in the evening, beginning tomorrow night, Sunday. And it just makes the corners of people's mouths turn upwards. It makes it possible for people to start to talk about planning outdoor activities, taking longer walks in the sunshine, going shopping in the sunshine in the evening. So it's something that helps, I just think, the mood, the spirit of Massachusetts and the country, and we desperately need it. And that extra sunlight in the evening is important. It's daylight sunshine time. That's really what it's all about, and the corners of people's mouths turn upwards when they have that extra sunlight in the evening. That's why I have sponsored the legislation over the years. I've been the lead member of Congress in moving it from the end of April, which is where it was in 1986, now to the beginning of March. But we have a lot more to do to claim more time in the evening, and that's what I've done in partnering with Marco Rubio. It's to introduce the legislation about making daylight savings time year-round. And there's a real movement out there in order to accomplish that. And I believe ultimately that's what we need in order to ensure that people get that extra hour of sunlight when they enjoy it the most, which is in the evening hours.
Any last questions? Going once, going twice. Alrighty, we'll wrap up. If Senator, you have any last words.
Yeah, happy Daylight Savings Time Day, everybody. And thank you to Beth. Thank you to Mike. Thank you for your great leadership. And,
Happy to be here.
Thank you, Senator.
Taking care of the children of Brockton and Massachusetts.
Sure. Nice to see you, Mike, too.
Thank you. Nice. Same here, Beth. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. Have a great afternoon. I'm going out in the sunshine.
I'm with you, Beth.
Enjoy the day.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Everybody, bye.